Right now, someone is facing a deeply personal decision about you, one far more serious than you may realize. What I am about to describe may already be unfolding quietly inside another person's mind, while you remain completely unaware of it. On the surface, everything may appear distant, silent, or emotionally uncertain between the two of you. There may be little communication, mixed signals, or long stretches of silence that leave you questioning what they truly feel. But beneath that silence, something important is happening. There is someone who has been thinking about you far more intensely than they allow themselves to admit. Even when they try to push the thoughts away, your presence keeps returning to them unexpectedly. And what they are wrestling with internally is not a small emotional question. It is a life-altering choice centered around you. This is not only about conversations you shared or memories that linger.
It goes deeper than that. You became someone whose existence left a permanent imprint on their inner world. Your presence affected them in ways they cannot easily explain. You became emotionally significant, not temporary, not replaceable, but deeply woven into their psychological and emotional landscape. Now they stand at a crossroads within themselves. Part of them wants to move closer to you, to finally stop resisting what they feel and step fully into the connection. Another part remains trapped inside fear, uncertainty, and old emotional defenses. They keep asking themselves difficult questions in the quiet moments nobody else sees. Should they reach for you again? Should they risk vulnerability? Should they continue protecting themselves, or finally allow themselves to choose something real? This internal decision feels enormous to them because you are not just another passing chapter in their life. You became a mirror that forced them to confront parts of themselves they had avoided for years. That is why this situation feels emotionally heavy. Outwardly, they may appear perfectly fine. They go through routines. They speak to people normally. They laugh when expected to laugh. Sometimes they may even act detached or emotionally unavailable. But internally, your presence continues resurfacing in the quiet spaces of their mind. Late at night, early in the morning, in moments when distractions disappear. That is when the deeper questions return. They wonder whether choosing you could completely reshape the direction of their future. At the same time, they fear making the wrong choice. They fear that if they remain silent, they could lose you permanently. Yet they also fear that if they come toward you and fail again, they may have to confront emotions they no longer know how to control. Many people misunderstand silence. Silence does not automatically mean absence of love. Often, silence is what happens when someone feels emotionally overwhelmed by the depth of what they carry inside. Some people withdraw because vulnerability feels unsafe to them. Others hesitate because they were never taught how to receive love without fear attached to it. For certain individuals, caring deeply feels dangerous, and that is part of what is happening here. You represent something emotionally meaningful that they can no longer dismiss or minimize. Their heart keeps pulling them back toward the feeling of being understood by you, toward the emotional safety they experienced in your presence, toward the version of themselves that existed when they were close to you. Their heart remembers peace, but their mind remembers pain. So, internally, a battle begins. Their emotions remind them how deeply connected they felt to you, but their thoughts immediately respond with caution. Old wounds rise to the surface. Fear tells them to protect themselves. Their mind warns them not to risk disappointment, rejection, vulnerability, or emotional exposure again. They begin questioning whether they are emotionally capable of sustaining something this deep, whether they are worthy of the connection at all, whether they can trust themselves not to ruin it. And unknowingly, you have become the center of that inner conflict. Because not every connection transforms a person internally. Some people enter our lives briefly and leave only surface-level memories behind. But others awaken something much deeper. They force growth, reflection, emotional confrontation. They reveal hidden fears and hidden desires simultaneously. That is what happened between you and this person. You did not simply attract their attention. You changed something inside them. Without forcing it, you touched emotional layers they had spent years protecting. You brought them closer to parts of themselves they had not fully explored before. You challenged their emotional comfort zone without trying to control them. You awakened longing, vulnerability, hope, and fear all at once. And that combination is powerful, because meaningful love does not only make a person feel desired, it also forces them to confront themselves honestly. That is why this decision feels so intense for them now. They understand, consciously or unconsciously, that choosing you would require more than romance. It would require emotional growth, honesty, vulnerability, surrendering old defense mechanisms, letting go of patterns that once protected them from pain but also kept them disconnected from deeper intimacy. Part of them is ready for that transformation. Another part is terrified of it. So they remain suspended between movement and hesitation, between reaching forward and retreating back into emotional safety. Yet, despite all their attempts to distance themselves emotionally, your presence continues echoing through their inner world. Because some connections are not easily forgotten once they touch the deeper layers of the psyche. You became tied to something larger within them, to healing, to awakening, to emotional truth. And even if they try to suppress it during the day, the feeling continues, returning quietly beneath the surface. That is why this decision has become so serious. Because deep down, they know this is not simply about whether to text you, call you, or reconnect casually. It is about whether they are finally ready to stop running from what they truly feel. Choosing you would require them to grow, and growth has always unsettled the ego. Real transformation asks a person to step beyond familiar patterns, beyond emotional defenses, beyond the version of themselves that feels safe and controlled. Without even trying, you invited them toward that transformation. Around you, they felt more connected to who they truly were, more honest, more emotionally awake. Even if they could never fully explain it, they sensed the difference within themselves whenever you were near. That kind of connection does not disappear simply because communication fades. This is why they still think about you. This is why your name still stirs something deep inside them no matter how much time passes. You were never just another temporary person in their life. You became something meaningful. You represented comfort during emotional chaos. You represented clarity during confusion. You became connected to a version of themselves that felt more authentic and emotionally alive. And when someone encounters that kind of emotional significance, they are eventually forced to confront themselves. There is a difficult truth about the human psyche. The parts of ourselves we avoid do not disappear. They continue shaping our behavior quietly from beneath the surface. Fear that remains unexamined becomes control. Pain that remains unresolved becomes distance. Emotional wounds that are ignored begin influencing every important connection afterward. This person is beginning to realize that now. They are standing at the edge of understanding that silence itself is also a choice. Avoidance is still a decision. And deep down, they know that remaining frozen forever could eventually cost them the very connection they cannot stop thinking about. They understand that someone else may eventually recognize your value clearly and move toward you without hesitation. They know that what they delayed appreciating may not remain available forever. and that realization has started weighing heavily on them. Yet at the same time, old emotional wounds continue speaking loudly inside their mind. Their hesitation is not always about you. Much of it comes from experiences that existed long before you entered their life. Pain from the past teaches people to protect themselves, even when protection begins destroying the very thing they secretly want most. And beneath all of that exists an even deeper fear they rarely admit openly, the fear that they may not truly be enough for you. Genuine love makes people vulnerable because once something matters deeply, the possibility of losing it becomes terrifying. The deeper the emotional connection, the more self-doubt rises to the surface. They begin questioning whether they are emotionally capable of sustaining something this meaningful, whether they can meet the depth your presence awakens inside them. This entire process has been unfolding quietly beneath the surface while life appears normal on the outside. And while they wrestle internally with these thoughts, your own energy matters more than you realize. The way you carry yourself now matters. The way you respect yourself matters. Sometimes the exact moment another person finally realizes they want to choose you is the moment you stop emotionally waiting for them to decide. When you stop placing your life on pause for someone else's confusion, something shifts energetically within the connection. Because real transformation begins when you stop allowing another person's uncertainty to determine your worth or direction. Meanwhile, they continue replaying memories involving you over and over again. Small moments return unexpectedly. The way you listened without judgment, the way you gave them space without trying to control them, the emotional calm they felt around you. And every time those memories return, the same realization quietly follows. This connection was not random. You became a mirror reflecting both who they currently are and who they could potentially become. And mirrors can feel uncomfortable when someone is not fully ready to confront themselves honestly. That is why they move back and forth emotionally. One moment they feel ready to reach out, to finally choose courage over fear. Then suddenly they retreat again because distance feels emotionally safer than vulnerability. Part of them believes time will eventually solve everything. But time does not erase meaningful connections. It reveals them more clearly, and through that clarity, they are beginning to notice how emotionally empty certain things feel without you present. The shift you created inside them did not fade when the relationship changed. It remained. Now they are thinking about responsibility in a much more serious way. They're asking themselves difficult questions. Can they consistently show up emotionally? Can they protect the connection instead of sabotaging it when fear appears? Can they stop offering partial effort while secretly wanting full emotional intimacy? These questions require maturity, honesty, and accountability, because they understand something important now. Choosing you would require more than temporary emotion or inconsistent behavior. It would require integrity. They know you are not someone meant for confusion, mixed signals, emotional games, or endless waiting. They understand that being part of your life fully would mean choosing honesty over avoidance, consistency over uncertainty, and emotional presence over fear-driven withdrawal. And this is often where hesitation becomes strongest, not because the feelings are weak, but because they are real. They understand that loving you properly would demand evolution from them. It would force them to outgrow old patterns, confront emotional wounds, and take responsibility for how they show up within the relationship. Growth always comes with discomfort. Transformation always asks something from the individual, and right now they are standing directly at that threshold, trying to decide whether they are ready to move forward into emotional growth and authenticity or retreat back into the familiar patterns that once protected them but also kept them disconnected from the deeper love they secretly long for. What once felt comfortable and emotionally safe to them is no longer giving them the same sense of security. They can feel that something inside you has shifted, even if you have said very little. Your energy feels different now. You are no longer endlessly chasing, over-explaining, or trying to pull them closer. Instead, you have become more grounded within yourself. Your focus has slowly returned to your own peace, your own growth, your own life. And they feel that change more deeply than you realize. When one person stops chasing, the balance of control changes completely. The moment you stop waiting emotionally, reality begins confronting the other person in ways they cannot ignore anymore. They begin noticing that your worth does not depend on whether they choose you or not. They sense that your life is continuing forward regardless of their hesitation. That realization creates urgency inside them. Suddenly, they begin imagining scenarios they once avoided thinking about. They picture you moving on peacefully. They imagine someone else recognizing your value immediately and loving you without confusion or delay. They imagine losing access to your presence permanently. And through those thoughts, they finally begin understanding how emotionally attached they truly are. Fear starts changing shape within them. At first, they feared vulnerability and emotional exposure. Now, they fear regret. They fear disappointing you. They fear reopening wounds from the past. They fear realizing too late that they allowed something rare to slip away because they stayed trapped inside hesitation for too long. Sometimes, people believe remaining still is neutral, but stillness can also become avoidance, and avoidance is still a decision. Every day they remain silent, despite what they feel, they slowly begin experiencing the emotional cost of that silence. Regret begins building quietly beneath the surface. There is a growing awareness that something meaningful is drifting farther away while they remain frozen between fear and action. They are learning something difficult now. You cannot replace a meaningful connection with distractions forever. Silence does not remove emotion. It only postpones confrontation with it. This connection is forcing them to realize that living entirely from self-protection eventually creates emotional emptiness. A life built only on safety without emotional depth begins feeling hollow after a while. The question inside them is no longer whether they feel something for you. The question has become whether they are brave enough to honor what they feel. And while they move through this internal process, your role is no longer to convince them of anything. Your role is to remain aligned with yourself. The most powerful thing you can do now is continue choosing your own growth and self-respect. Because something important happens when a person stops abandoning themselves while waiting for someone else's certainty. Clarity appears. And whether they step forward soon or much later, the deeper transformation has already begun within you. Once you truly choose yourself, your sense of worth stops depending on another person's indecision. At that point, there are only two outcomes. Either they rise emotionally to meet you, or they step aside. But both paths move your life forward. People willing to confront themselves honestly are the ones who truly awaken emotionally. And this is why the tension inside them keeps intensifying. The situation is no longer only about romance or attraction. It has become connected to their identity. Choosing you would require them to become a more honest version of themselves. It would require emotional maturity, consistency, accountability, and a higher standard of behavior. That can feel terrifying for someone who has spent years protecting themselves emotionally. Some people are comfortable longing for love from a distance because distance feels safe. But real intimacy is different. Real connection demands authenticity, and when a connection carries the depth yours does, it leaves no room for emotional hiding places. This is why people sometimes sabotage meaningful relationships or hide behind excuses about timing, circumstances, or logic. Often, what appears rational on the surface is actually fear underneath. Because the truth is this: they are afraid of failing at something that genuinely matters to them. You reached parts of them nobody else could easily reach. And now they question whether they are capable of being the kind of person this connection truly deserves. Can they remain emotionally steady? Can they become reliable? Can they stop disappearing into fear when vulnerability appears? Because choosing you means they can no longer hide behind emotional distance. It means being fully seen, fully accountable, fully responsible for how they love and how they show up. For someone used to emotional self-protection, that level of openness can feel overwhelming. Yet at the same time, they are deeply aware of your strength now. They see that you are not collapsing without them. You are not begging for attention or losing yourself inside uncertainty anymore. You are living your value quietly and naturally, and that makes your presence even more powerful in their eyes. What they miss most is not only you, it is who they felt themselves becoming around you. They compare other connections to the one they had with you, and something always feels missing. Authentic emotional connection leaves a permanent imprint on the psyche. Once someone experiences it, shallow substitutes become painfully obvious. And now the possibility of you truly moving on feels real to them. They imagine you finding peace with someone emotionally certain about you, someone who does not hesitate, someone who chooses you openly instead of fighting their feelings internally. That thought cuts deeply, because they are beginning to realize they may lose something extraordinary simply because fear kept them inactive for too long. The questions inside them are becoming more direct now. Is fear destroying a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Have they spent too much time running from something that was meant to transform them? You became a mirror that revealed their emotional patterns clearly, especially their tendency to retreat when things become deeply meaningful. But your purpose was never to remain trapped inside uncertainty forever. Your purpose is to continue building a life that feels peaceful, meaningful, and emotionally aligned for you. And as they sense you evolving beyond the waiting stage, their internal pressure intensifies. They recognize that you are no longer available for confusion, inconsistency, or emotional games. They understand that eventually they will need to make a real choice, either step forward with intention or step away completely. The comfortable middle ground is disappearing, and life itself seems to respond when this kind of emotional shift happens. Connections meant to evolve usually find their way through fear eventually. Connections that exist only to teach lessons fade once growth stops happening. Right now, something is building beneath the surface. Eventually, it will emerge into reality through a message, a conversation, an action, or a final decision. Until then, your task is simple. Remain steady in your worth. The moment you stop negotiating your value, the world begins responding differently to you. Now, the emotional pressure rests with them, because life is asking them to confront themselves honestly. Their indecision is becoming emotionally exhausting. They are starting to understand that meaningful love requires facing the darker, fearful parts of themselves instead of endlessly avoiding them. Through this connection, they are finally seeing themselves more clearly than before. And now they're asking themselves one central question: are they living from fear, or are they finally ready to live from truth? They feel time differently now because they can sense you are no longer emotionally waiting in the same way. And they understand something important. If they want a place in your life, they will need to show up genuinely, not halfway, not inconsistently, but honestly. This is the moment where courage either appears or does not. Either way, clarity is arriving. Meanwhile, you are reclaiming your peace, and that matters more than anything else. Love is not something you beg for or earn through suffering. Love is something you allow into your life through alignment, self-respect, and emotional truth. When you stop shrinking yourself for others, everything becomes clearer. The outcome of this situation is already beginning to take shape. If they come toward you, it will happen with sincerity and intention. If they walk away, it will reveal the limits of what they were emotionally capable of giving.